Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday night on Narrative Live. It's so good to be with you tonight as we continue our investigation into the Charles Bausman affair, or the Charles Bausman file. And we're very excited to have Joe Dempsey here with us tonight. How are you, Joe? Welcome back to the show.
Good. Thanks, Ev. Hi. Nice to see you. Happy New Year.
You too. And Gull Suburban is back, making her second appearance on the show. Well, by audio only, but still, welcome back, Gull. It's nice to have you here. One of these days, I'm going to get you on camera. You're my new LB project. It took me about a year to get LB to show up on camera, so maybe we'll get to you quicker. So we're going to do a lot of interesting things tonight. We're going to look into the Bausman file that we didn't get into yesterday, especially the video of him on Russian state television on his return to Russia, basically providing what seems to be a step-by-step way for the Republican Party to fight this whole, January 6th allegations around the coup. So it's fascinating, it's interesting, and you'll enjoy the show. But before we do that, there is a lot of breaking news tonight, and it revolves around this man. Let's take the supers off there. Kevin McCarthy has now got a letter from the committee, from the January the 6th committee. Now, we're not surprised that he got a letter. Of course, he's certainly one of the more interesting characters around January the 6th, who has a lot of explaining to do. But I am surprised by the amount of detail in this particular letter. And I just want to run through some of it with you. Let's pull it up here. And I have to put, because I can't really see this far away, I'm just going to quickly pull up the actual presentation here. Give me 1 second while I do that. Can one of you see it? Do you have the letters in front of you, either of you? If not, it'll take me 1 second. It'll take me
I do.
1 second. This is the joy of live television with breaking news. I have it here. So
I have it when you're ready.
Oh, okay. I've got it as well. So basically, it's interesting because they talk about this one thing that he did on January the 6th, where he made the speech. I have the clip here, but I won't play the whole thing. But he basically on that day said the president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding. The facts require immediate action by President Trump, accept his share of responsibility, quell the brewing unrest, and ensure President-elect Biden is able to successfully begin his term. Now, he no longer thinks that. At least he might think it, but he no longer says those kinds of things. Go ahead, Joe.
He didn't think that 3 weeks after he said it. So where he was in Mar-a-Lago, right? He got summoned down to, I guess called into the principal's office, if you will. I don't know what happened at that meeting that he had at Mar-a-Lago after he said those things 3 weeks after this, but he definitely changed his tune afterwards.
He sure did. And, the thing is about him is that he seems to be very much beholden to various lobby groups. And it seems maybe there's some interference there from some lobby groups in trying to convince him to change his tune. Now, the next page is really interesting because now it talks about an interview that he did with Norah O'Donnell at CBS News, where she's confronting him on this. And she said, you said you spoke with the president. What did the president say he would do? And he said, I know he had to put a tweet out there. I told him he needs to talk to the nation. I told him what was happening right then. And then McCarthy says, I was very clear with the president that when I called him, he had to stop and he has to go to the American public and tell them to stop this. It took a while before President Trump actually did that. But again, this is not something he admits to readily anymore. We know he said it. We said it on the record, and he said it with Norah O'Donnell. But I didn't think he's readily admitting that this is a conversation that he had with Trump on that day.
Yeah, I don't know how he can deny it because, it's in the heat of the moment. It's actually as it's happening. It's what's authentic. Like, it's probably him being his most authentic when that happens. He was literally under attack.
Yeah. And nervous and scared,
Sure.
Even though he probably knew what was coming, even though they knew they were anticipating this because they seem to have been involved in the planning. It's surprising that this is, that even in the heat of the moment, they were shocked by how out of hand it had gotten. Now, there's also the response that Trump said to Kevin McCarthy, which is, well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you. So zero remorse or zero regret, and just seems to not want to take any action there. And then what I found really interesting on the next page is Jake Sherman's reporting. Jake Sherman, of course, now has been outed as having Kevin McCarthy on a speed dial. But, he tells Jake Sherman, or at least Jake Sherman reports, that President Donald Trump and House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy got into a screaming match Wednesday as an enraged mob of Trump supporters attacked the Capitol, according to some familiar with the episode, which in this case is probably Kevin McCarthy, who's familiar with the episode. So, it goes on a lot like that, but definitely Kevin McCarthy has a lot to answer for, and I think the committee is hoping that he is going to testify honestly, and I think he will. I think all indications are that he will testify. Is that right, Joe?
I don't know. I honestly don't. I think he's got a little bit to kind of he's a minority leader, so we're having difficulty trying to get even Jim Jordan, right, the ranking member of Judiciary. He's not cooperating. Yeah, I don't know, how reluctant or how forcefully they want to enforce either these letters or these subpoenas.
Right.
I don't know
think they're going to subpoena.
At this point.
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know why at this point they're not, sending draft subpoenas along with these letters to say, hey, this is kind of coming. If you don't, I think they should be a little bit more forceful. But
look what's happening with
they have a process.
We have not heard yet about Meadows. It's amazing that it's been so long, and Meadows has not received his indictment, and look how long it's taken just to get Bannon through, which will be July, I think, or June when the next hearing takes place, which is way too far away. Of course, yesterday we had people around both Donald Trump Jr. and Kimberly Foyle subpoenaed to the committee, and that I think is really interesting, and we look forward to seeing what comes out of that testimony. But that's the latest news as we have it from the committee. Interesting stuff going on today. Gal, is there anything you want to share about that letter or anything else you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I mean, I would just send a message to Kevin McCarthy that you're not going to be the leader anyway, so you might as well tell the truth.
Why do you think he's not going to be the leader?
I just think that they're going to play him and pull him in either direction so that he's, confused and afraid. That's kind of what Marjorie Taylor Greene and the Freedom Caucus, I think that they're trying to scare him into not testifying, making him think, oh, we're going to vote against you for the leadership of, the House, but they're going to vote against him anyway. So he just needs to not listen to all the threats and the noise from that side, because they're not consistent people.
You don't think that if he maintains the stance, that you don't think that the party will stay behind him? Because I think if he continues to follow whatever the party masters of the party are telling him to do, then he could still get could keep the speakership. I don't see, maybe they'll do this Donald Trump thing where they replace him with Donald Trump. That's the other theory out there, but. I think it's interesting to see whether if he toes the line, he might keep his job. I think that's the calculus he's making.
Yeah, I think as voters, we need to have our own calculus in some of this too. I think that we have the ability to make sure that he's not the speaker, and I think that when people start talking and having conversations about how it's almost inevitable that the Republicans are going to take the midterms, that's voter suppression right there. Yeah. If we stop with that messaging, if we stop saying that it's inevitable that that's going to happen, then we have to give ourselves hope and say that we have the ability to make that change.
I think you're absolutely right there. And I think that we don't know enough yet to figure out what this next election is going to be about, because we still need to, so many shoes need to fall on this. And there's certainly no reason, according to the latest analysis of the district and the gerrymandering of the districts, it looks like it's fairly even between what the Republicans pick up and what the Democrats pick up, even though there's been some of this early noise about the Republicans benefiting more than the Democrats. It seems like in reality, the gerrymandering is sort of even in different parts of the country. Still, it's an uphill battle. It's a midterm, and it tends to switch sides in a midterm. So who knows what will happen. All right, let's get back to the Bausman file, because I am so into last night's show was fascinating to me. I could have spoken to the three of you, well, Gal and the other two guests that we had for the entire night, because there was so much interesting information that came out, and it was so interesting to see it build on itself, and that we didn't have the videotape that we really wanted to play. But just to catch everyone up tonight, let's just do a quick update for everybody about who Mr. Bausman really is. So this is Charles Bausman. I think he is a Russian disinformation agent, which means in his case that he might be directly linked to a Russian intelligence services, which is what I think he is, or he's indirectly linked to the Russian intelligence services through this guy whose name is Alexei Komov, who works for Konstantin Malofeev. Konstantin Malofeev is an oligarch who spends a lot of his money on the Russian Orthodox Church, and through that Russian Orthodox Church runs this incredibly interesting influence group, if you want to call them that, maybe a propaganda group, maybe a full-on spy group, you might want to call them that. And Malofeev is tied to Alexander Dugin, who we described yesterday as Putin's Rasputin, the man who sort of has given the entire Russian attack on democracy and a theory, an ideology on which they could base their attack. Alexei Komov is his sort of middleman in Russia. Jack Hannock is Sean Hannity's former producer, believe it or not. So if you're wondering how Sean Hannity gets such an inside line on all of that, it's probably through Jack Hannock. And the man that yesterday we landed up describing as the man who might be the biggest influence agent in this whole story is Ed Lazansky, who's a professor who runs a fake university, according to Grant Stern. And he's been this sort of central person who's been pulling together a lot of the people who are sort of anti-American and pro-Russian in their views inside America. So Ed Lazansky is an interesting character. In fact, I want to show you a little bit of a tape, if I could. This is, I found some tape through Patrick Simpson and Grant Stern showing Ed Lazansky and Bausman talking to, I think it was a conference in Moscow. I can't be sure if it was in Moscow or it was in the States, but nevertheless, this is very early on, I think, in Bausman's career in all of this. And he describes what he's doing with his publication. Of course, I'm looking for it. I can't find it right now. Let me make sure that it is here. And then there's an interesting exchange between him and Ed Lazansky. So I don't have it right in front of me. But you guys can fill in a little bit of time here by talking whatever you want to about both the Charles Bausman as an individual and Russian insider, but also more broadly as this group. So Joe or Gal, I don't know who wants to pick it up, but go ahead. Gal, do you want to jump in there and talk a little bit about?
Oh, sure.
Sorry.
All right. Well, so I was watching. No, you're good. I was watching earlier today some of his old Russian insider, and he used to be on the show called Crosstalk on RT.
Oh yeah.
And that's where you get some really, quick reaction answers from him, because it's kind of meant to be an argumentative show where they have, they're coming from opposing views.
It was their version of Crossfire, if I remember.
Yeah. And what's interesting about him is he is only defending Russia. I mean, it's a very strong feeling that he has about this. So it was almost like I was not watching an American citizen argue with people.
Yeah, he certainly does have a very strong pro-Russian point of view. What's interesting, of course, we showed you video of him actually at January the 6th, shooting video of himself at the inside the halls of Congress as all of this was going on, all this crazy rioting was going on. And as we play back some of this video, it's worth noting that when he did his show on Russian television, he was on Rossiya television, which is the state-run television. He did not, in fact, mention that he was there shooting this kind of video. I thought that was really interesting, Gal, that he was actually there. He had shot all this video, and even though some of that video was included in the documentary on state television, he did not talk about actually being there and shooting this video. Nor did we see any of this video, obviously, because it's of him. But I thought that was really interesting that they didn't confess that.
Yeah, he didn't say it explicitly. He just kind of more commented about what, the mood and the temperature and what, the patriots and,
Yeah, he gives a really interesting retake on American history as well, which is fascinating. So by the way, if you're watching on narrative.org/TV, I can see those comments and I can take those comments on the air. So narrative.org/TV is where you can make sure that we see those comments. So it means going to a different place to watch the show if you're on social media, but it's the one way I can get those comments directly on the air, like this one from Marie, who says, Dugin wants to take advantage of the Kazakh protest to turn the Commonwealth of Independent States into a Eurasian Union. I'm not even sure what that means, Marie, but there you go. So we'll keep on watching those comments and we'll get back to what you guys have to say as well. In the meantime, you've been watching this video of Bausman at the Congress. And why we're showing that is because Gal found this incredible video on Russian television. Once he got back to Russia, I guess he stopped being a full-on spy, and he started producing or working with this documentary for Rossiya television, which is, as we heard yesterday, the state-run main TV network. So everything you're about to hear from that should be viewed in that light. I mean, this is Russian propaganda designed for Russian people. never mind just Russian propaganda for the rest of the world. So it doesn't have any of the filters that we would normally expect. It's just, this is what Russia wants its people to know. And this is basically what the Russian people think after watching these documentaries. Let's go ahead, Gal. Talk about how you found this.
Yeah. Well, I found it because you guys were talking about it on your episode in December. And I was thinking, who is this guy? And so I kind of started looking into it. But he has this really obscure Telegram channel that has like just a few followers, which I think is really curious. He seems to like wipe it clean and then put some things on it and then wipe it clean. So may just be a place to disseminate messaging. But what I will note about the video too is that he shot this immediately. So he filmed this on January 7th, the day after, the insurrection. And then it was aired in Russia on, I want to say January 16th or 17th. And then it wasn't converted into an English version until months later. So this was specifically for Russia on the 7th.
And we know that he left town right after January the 7th. So he probably recorded this video and then left town. He went to back to Russia, where we know he was spotted later last year. But he's not been back to Pennsylvania, where his base was. And he left all his property, about $1 million worth of property behind. It has not been sold. There's some taxes probably still owed on it. But he's still very much a man who appears to have left in a very, very quick hurry after January 6th.
He may be gone so long that it's okay that his Christmas lights were left up.
Yeah, right. A year later, probably still. But I think they did send a friend to actually pull those down. Along the way onto January the 6th, he was very involved in so many things that really make him suspicious to me in any event. For one thing, he kept having these Stop the Steal rallies in Pennsylvania. So he wasn't just like a editor of a Russian insider newspaper or online publication, which is his what he claimed was his job. He was also organizing protests along with the Moonies of all people, demanding that there was a recount in the Pennsylvania elections there. He's which is unusual, I think, for any journalist to be involved directly in organizing protests, but never mind a Russian journalist who's here, even though he's an American citizen, who's here doing a publication for Russian interests, to be planning, Stop the Steal events and encouraging people to ask for a recount in Pennsylvania. Seems really unusual to me. And then he also had this barn that he owns, one of those $1 million worth of property, in which he hosted neo-Nazi rallies, in particular the party was Nation of Justice. The Justice Party. Was that what it's
National
called?
Justice Party.
The National Justice Party. So I try to keep all these things in my head, but it sometimes disappears. So the National Justice Party held their opening launch rally inside his barn, which is, an unusual look for anybody, but certainly for a Russian propaganda disseminator, it's even more unusual. He's also, a monarchist. He's really religious Orthodox guy. He really believes in returning things to the old way. And by the way, I didn't mention this yesterday, but it's really interesting that he's blamed the United States on the 40,000 people who died in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. He says that if America wasn't there, 40,000 people would not have been killed. Which, of course, if Russia wasn't there, there would be no war at all. He also
blames the flight on the U.S. also.
Right, the Malaysian flight, the Malaysian MH17, whatever it was. Yeah, this is the barn, by the way. I have a kind of obsession about this barn. I don't know why, but I'll just keep it up there for now. Okay, so now that's Bausman. We've set you up for Bausman. Going to set you up on Ed Lazansky a little bit more in a bit, but this is Bausman's as he's arriving in Russia, or at least he did the documentary here in the United States, but then was aired in Russia a few days later. And what I want everyone to really pay attention to here, because this is Russian state propaganda, and I always hesitate to put up anything that is going to be amplifying any sort of negative points of view or points of view that aren't true. Everything you're about to see that Bausman says is likely untrue. There's very little in here that I found that was true, and I think I'm showing it to you because I do think it's very telling about how the Republicans are actually responding to the investigation into January the 6th. Because what basically, as we'll run through here, he points to four basic things that that are the problem with the attacks on January the 6th. He first things he says is a false flag. He says that FBI informants were involved in aggravating this whole event. He says that Pence backstabbed Donald Trump, and then he says that Pence angered the mob, and that's why they got so violent. So keep that in your mind. This is the stuff that Russia is telling its people. It also happens to be what the Republican Party is using as its main defense around January the 6th. So exactly the same talking points coming from the Russians as are coming from the Republican Party.
Same words, backstab. They stabbed him in the back. That's what that's what they were saying about Pence. Yeah. And how he was treated, how he treated Trump on January 6th, that he had stabbed him in the back. Same words.
This was a year ago that this was aired there. So it's certainly the first instances that, this is the next day. I don't think anyone in the United States was thinking in these terms, except for Charles Bausman, who was busy putting together this documentary, which aired the next day.
Yeah, I mean, the next day you had the people that stormed the Capitol. Even during it a little bit, you had them blaming Antifa. If you remember, Matt Gaetz went up on the floor and said, "Oh, we've identified Antifa." And it wasn't until weeks later, seemingly maybe after this aired somewhere, that it became FBI, in three-letter alphabet informants or instigators.
Absolutely. I think it's a really telling video, and we'll get to it in just a second. But I want to just show you this video of him and Ed Lazansky, because it is interesting. This is them. Actually, you know what? I'll wait on that. Let's listen to the first video from. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to jump in real quick. You know what else happened on January 7th? The intelligence community actually put out a report on January 7th about the 2020 elections. So there was like a 15-page, very high level. This is an unclassified report. Having to do with what the intelligence communities here, our own intelligence communities, found about the 2020 elections. And in that, they said, Putin was trying to, denigrate Biden, and he was, supporting Trump. Not certainly to the extent that they had done in the 2016 election. But then they also sort of mentioned these things about Andrei Derkach. They talk about influence campaigns from Russian intelligence that were going through prominent Americans, right? So, I mean, think Ron Johnson, think Rudy Giuliani. So January 7th was an interesting day. And I think so much of that got lost because of what happened on January 6th, obviously. But that intelligence report, it's definitely worth reading.
That's really an interesting point. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Let's listen to the first clip then from Charles Bausman. This is on Russian state TV. It's propaganda. Everything you're about to hear from him is not true, but we want you to hear from him because it helps us understand how the Republicans are getting to their defense. So this is Bausman on Russian state television.
Bausman believes that the storming of the Capitol was a carefully planned false flag.
It would be naive to think that the FBI and similar agencies did not have agent provocateurs in the crowd. Their assignment was likely to start fighting with the police, breach the police barriers, and incite the crowd to join them.
Now, that it may be true that there were FBI people on the grounds. They probably were. But do we know they incited anybody? I don't think we know that at all. I don't think we've seen any credible reporting at all that there were any FBI instigators. Yet it is one of these things that has persisted in Republican circles.
Yeah, it was Antifa, it was Black Lives Matter, it was everybody but the Republicans, right? It was everybody but Trump supporters. And even in that letter, when you look at what came out for Kevin McCarthy, they talked about even him saying, these are your supporters. He was telling Trump, McCarthy told Trump, these are your supporters.
Yeah, and this idea that this is a false flag, Gal, I mean, I think it's so... People have to understand a false flag means that the entire operation was, created to capture, I don't know, to incite a riot in order to capture them. I don't know what the thinking around a false flag would be, but it would be an incredibly impressive operation if this was a false flag. I mean, you would need so much coordination.
Stupid too, because they failed.
Right. And the president was leaving power
it's kind of a terrible one.
Yeah. And
well, what's interesting about Bausman too is like what would be the purpose of it, right? And Bausman, when he talks about it being a false flag, he claims the purpose is just to make Trump and Trump supporters look bad. Well, that's the dumbest thing to put so much time and effort and money and death and into, just to make. They already look bad. I mean,
they're leaving power anyhow.
To,
so why are you making them look bad? I mean, they'd lost the elections. They were going to be out of the political scene. So why, what's the impetus for doing something like this? It sort of loses sensibility quite quickly. But yet this is Russian state television, right after the event, telling the Russian state is a very popular TV network that this was a false flag. And also, I think, messaging that to the Republican Party here in the United States. So waiting for the Republican Party to pick that up as a defense, which in fact we haven't heard yet entirely. We haven't heard the false flag thing come out from the official Republican sources, although it certainly rumbles away on Fox News and in other news networks, which we want to talk about Epps in just a second as well, because I think it ties into this. But before we do, here's another clip, and this is about Michael Pence. So their argument here, well, let's listen to what he has to say. Again, this is Russian state propaganda. Everything you're about to hear is not true. You can't take this as being legitimate. And let's take a listen to what Charles Bausman has to say.
And there's a reason for that. There was a reason why the crowd was much angrier than perhaps people expected. Because just 2 hours before that, while Trump was making his speech, Mike Pence stabbed him in the back. In the Capitol building, because Mike Pence, the vice president, had the constitutional right to stop the counting of the electors because he had gotten official requests from the state legislatures where the votes were being challenged. Pennsylvania, where we're sitting right now, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona. All these places had said, look, we don't think that the election was done properly in our state. We want more time to try and figure out what happened. So Mike Pence had every right to say, I can't certify these electors. Let's send it back to the states and give them some more time.
Boy, that editing on Pence.
Right? Oh, and the music. So oh my God, it's like Darth Vader's coming.
I know. It's really interesting. I mean, that's very important stuff, the semiotics of this. But there he is looking like the devil with these this evil grin and these, I'm not saying he's the nicest guy in the world. I'm not saying that, but he certainly doesn't look like they're portraying him.
So seeing this for me is I don't want to see that almost in a vacuum, because we have to take a larger view and see what else that really means. If he's talking about Pence having this sort of power, remember who else was saying that? It was Jeffrey Bossert Clark in his letter to Georgia that Pence has this sort of power. And it was the John Eastman memo, right? The plenary power. And then also in the lawsuits I think it was, there was a Wisconsin voting alliance or something like that that sued Mike Pence. And in that complaint, they referenced the exact same cases and same sort of case law that was referenced in the Clark letter. So these three items
and all
to
the
me
same
sort of
states
all come
too.
Together.
It's really interesting.
It seems that that if the focus was that Pence has this power, everybody knew that Pence had this power. Charles Bausman knew that Pence had this power. Where did he get that information from?
Well,
Russian insider talent,
I think it's a very good point, and I think what you're saying here is that there is a flow through of a plan that was in the Eastman letter, that was in all the thinking around Donald Trump's coordination of the coup, the war room and what have you, Giuliani's phone calls to various senators, the attempt to get almost 100 congressmen to come along with this. They had meetings to do just exactly that, based on this idea that Pence had this power, when we know he doesn't really have that power. And how did Charles Bausman know any of this stuff? I mean, he would have to be pretty plugged in
I have an idea.
to everything. Go ahead, Gal.
Ooh.
Yeah. Who else lives in Pennsylvania or is very, in touch with Pennsylvania is Ivan Raiklin. Mm-hmm. And Ivan Raiklin, what came up with the Pence card.
You know what? That's a really, really good point. I'm going to actually pull that. When you look at the two sort of Russian-influenced cells, if you want to call them, or call them what you will, in Trump in this event of January the 6th, it's certainly, here's one, is Michael Flynn and his group of three, Phil Waldron, Sam Keschel, and Ivan Raiklin, who is someone who was born in the Soviet Union and also someone who, appears to be operating on behalf of Russia. That's one group. And then you see the Charles Bausman group as another, but they both seem to be talking the same language. And it is interesting that you point that out, Gal. And we haven't really heard much about Ivan Reichlen. He's not been called yet, has he, to testify or anything like that?
Not to my
No,
awareness.
he's worried
No.
though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he does. He's got thoughts. So what's interesting too about this is again, come back to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, right? So last night you guys were having the conversation about all the different things that were occurring in Lancaster.
Mm-hmm.
The interview that Bausman was doing was done in Lancaster. When Ivan Reichlen's operatives approached Everett Stern, allegedly what Everett Stern is saying, who was supposed to be in the debate tonight, by the way, and he's unable to do that.
Yeah.
The Pennsylvania GOP won't let him.
Interesting.
But that was at Lancaster, right? So when we looked at the pictures and everything that took place with him in Belma and Ruth, I believe it was, there was a sign that the Lancaster Patriot. So this is all something going on in Lancaster. Something else, and this right. is relatively new, or maybe just new to me. One of the things that we've been looking at has been this thing called the Amistad Project, and there's probably going to be a lot more discussion on that at another time, I think. But one of the things that they were saying within our findings, they're talking about votes and ballots being transported from New York to Pennsylvania, and of course they went to Lancaster, and they're saying that those votes disappeared in Lancaster. So it's just so odd that this place that's within, if you throw a rock, Scott Perry's district, Representative Scott Perry's district is right next door to Lancaster. So there's a hotbed in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
That is really interesting to point that out. And of course, the Moonies are not far away from there. So I think that's interesting too. When you look at this map that I've got here of where Bausman had his 3 properties in Quarryville, it's not far away. It was 2 hours away that the Moonies have their bases as well in Pennsylvania. But you are looking at a place that was really the hotbed of everything that happened in 2020. It seems to have taken place in that zone. I haven't heard about the Amistad Project either, but I think you're raising some interesting points there that I think are very important for everyone to look at. That this was an operation that was taking place in Pennsylvania, probably against the Pennsylvania voters, and I don't know why not much attention is being paid to it, because there clearly is a foreign operative footprint here, which looks like it was very active in Pennsylvania. Now it could be that they've reached some sort of agreement with the Russians, and the Russians are no longer here for that reason. That could be one of the things that has happened, because the way they deal with these things is counterintelligence. We wouldn't necessarily see the court case or anything out in public. But I wonder if the commission should still be taking a look at this. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be looking at the fact that there were Russian operatives involved in this.
Nor should they lose sight of the fact that this is an ongoing event, right? I mean, if this is an operation, it's still occurring, because tomorrow, Ivan Reichlen is supposed to go to New Hampshire, and he's looking to go to I think he called for 10,000 people to go to New Hampshire's capital in Concord tomorrow to support legislation that would, I think, change the voting machines or not allow certain voting machines. So I don't even know that that's really interesting.
Tomorrow, Ivan Reichlen's doing this thing. I can't believe he's still active in Republican politics. It's kind of stunning.
And this is his second trip. Yeah. So he came to, I think he was in New Hampshire in November, I think, last year, and was there for, again, affidavits, right? Same thing that was going on in Michigan and other places. But to, be making this other trip, to New Hampshire is, again, like,
why New Hampshire?
Why is this still happening?
What are they trying to change the voting machines out there?
Yeah, there's legislation go ahead, Gal.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sure you know it. They have a state representative there that is introducing a bill, and what that bill is going to do is make everything, there's no electronics and no vote counting machines. So essentially what they're doing is they're removing all of the counting mechanisms. Everything would have to be done by hand. And so that's what they're rallying for there.
Which, of course, they're replacing all the state of election officials and all the state secretaries. Of course, if it's being done by hand, you might have more ways to influence that. If the people they hire to do the counting are motivated to do so. So that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. That's I
don't want to see any hanging chads.
Yeah, please, no more hanging chads. Let's take a look at another one here. Now, there's a overriding Christian theme to what Bausman supports. He has various other websites that are, pro-Christian, that are very all about, especially the Russian Orthodox Church. He's very much a believer in the church, but also propagates it as the right way of thinking. And then he aligns that with Donald Trump a lot, and the Trump campaign in everything that he talks about. So he's always referring to the white Christians in Russia, but he's also obviously signaling the white Christians in the United States. And it's in this backdrop that he sort of declares that there is some sort of threat imminent to the American democracy, and that the Christian good people of America are the ones that are upstanding and fighting it first. Let's take a look at this other clip from Russian state TV. This is propaganda. Nothing you're about to watch is real or true, sorry.
So what these people, what their goal actually is, in all seriousness, is they want to control the whole world. That's what they'd like to do, and that's what they're trying to push, every aspect of society and government in America to achieve for them. It's the same universalist ideology that's just like communism, that's just like the neoconservative idea of controlling the whole world. That's what they want to do. And, the right analogy is this. So in the Bible, the devil tempted Christ. And he said, look, if you'll just come over to my side, I'll give you power over the whole world. You'll control everything. And you'll be like the king of the world. And it looks like these crazy megalomaniacs who are pushing these policies now were also given that choice. And they chose not like Christ, but they chose to have power. And that's what they're after.
Okay, so that's a terrible analogy, obviously, because it doesn't make sense the way he's describing it. But regardless of that, I think what he's trying to say is that these alliance of globalist left, right, what do you call them, crazy megalomaniacs are trying to take over the world. I mean, it's so inconceivable. I'm not saying the globalist movement wasn't a global movement. Of course, it was a global movement. I mean, whether it was a movement or just a natural progression, who can say that? Who can say? But I will say that. This is just nonsense. And really the people who are trying to take over the world and destroy democracy are the people that he is supporting, which are autocrats and monarchists.
Yeah, I think the gaslighting is insane, right? I mean, we as like you said earlier, this broadcast really wasn't for us. It's for the Russians. So they're getting this information and they don't know that it's gaslighting. We can see it because we live in a democracy and we can, we have other information we have available to us. Right. But this is, gaslighting of the highest order.
Yeah. And it's just, it does really frame for you what the Russian, strategy is here. They are trying to frame a conflict between, sort of rational left-leaning people and this sort of this crazy, and I don't want to use the same way he uses crazy as he did, but, this sort of very out there autocratic right-wing fringe movement to try and end democracy, which has been working just fine for quite a while now. Gal, what do you think of that particular clip?
Well, I think it's adorable the fire that they were able to find to put in there, because we were burning cities down. Was like you could stomp on it and put it out, which is great. But it was a lot of projection. It's a lot of. It felt like it was just a biography. Like we want power, we want total control, and we want everybody to believe what we believe. And have one God and one focus, and life will be so much better if everybody's just like us.
Yeah, he does talk about that a lot. The projection is very, very evident.
That same sentiment, Gal, that you just mentioned about having this one God, and that's Mike Flynn, right? I mean, Mike Flynn came out and said we have to have a singular God, and and if you look at some of the things that Mike Flynn has been up to, I mean, obviously anybody who follows me knows about the whiteboard already. That whiteboard has led me to some places about where they're having these tours to the churches. These Christian churches are being filled with misinformation because Mike Flynn and that sort of group that he's tied with are going there and feeding them this information about tyranny and masks and all this other nonsense. But it is being done through the Christian churches. It is being done to a certain group here.
And this is why there is so much antagonism in the church circles and also amongst Republicans against the masks and against vaccinations. They view the masks and the vaccinations as tyranny because they've been fed this diet of everything is tyrannical and they're coming to take away your freedoms. So in that context, you would look at masks and vaccinations as these mandates as being, sort of tyrannical. People forcing you to do things.
It's governmental overreach, right? So they preach that there's, the government is going to overreach and they want a big brother and they're going to be in your pocket all the time. And then they actually make it happen. So then they're, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're making it occur.
Mm-hmm. Gal?
Yeah, it's just, I think the pandemic was like the perfect opportunity for the libertarian ideology that kind of has always wanted to have that sovereignty that they kind of imagine exists or needs to exist. I just think they saw a way to like sneak in with disinformation and capture it and kind of create this, this new Republican Party. Because when you look back at Roger Stone and some of these operatives that have been playing in politics for decades, that is their ideology. They are libertarian populists. So they talk about, just America first and a very limited federal government, states' rights. You see Ron DeSantis talking about this a lot. A lot of these operatives that are, basically spun from Roger Stone have this ideology.
Yeah. I think those are very astute points. I think it's also important to remember that this guy ran an online publication called Russian Insider, which for years has been feeding propaganda and extremist points of view to American audiences. I mean, he has written about denying the Holocaust. He has had the launch of the National Justice Party, a neo-Nazi party, at a barn that he owns. Now, no one else would host that kind of event. Only someone who was really interested in that party growing would host that kind of event. And who would have that interest? Someone like Charles Bausman, which is probably why he hosted the National Justice Party at his barn. This is someone who was inflaming the ideas that we are now dealing with for years in America for the Russian government. It's not just that he's just a guy who showed up on Russian television and is analyzing things. He is the instigator of a lot of these points of view and the inflamer of these points of view in America. So, in my opinion, a really dangerous kind of guy.
And we should mention too, Zev, that he's pretty close with Alex Jones. Right. So, you could look at this video from Bausman and think it came off InfoWars, in my opinion.
You're very similar lines of thinking. You sent me a great clip on Alex Jones earlier on, which I don't know if I have it ready. I do have it, but I'm going to have to find it in a bit because it's not where I think it should be. But I'm going to look for it because there's two clips that I really want to show you. One of them is Ed Lazansky, the other one is Alex Jones. I don't know why they're not here. It's so frustrating, but I will play for them for you in a bit. Let's get back to one more of him. This is, again, an extension of what we've been talking about, but he sort of branches out into how there are two versions, lining up for America, that there is a potential version where liberals are going to enslave Americans and the sort of leftist globalist ideology is going to enslave Americans, or a version where Trump and his supporters are going to somehow magically save America and return them to freedom. I mean, it's complete nonsense. Again, Russian state TV propaganda. Don't believe what you're about to see. But this is just interesting in terms of understanding how the Republicans are framing their thinking.
Or it's entirely possible, like in the Russian Revolution, that eventually these radical leftists will come to power and they'll enslave the country and terrorize it and do all the terrible things to Americans that they did to Russians. So nobody knows right now what's going to happen. That's what makes this situation so terrifying. And the world should really understand that America is on the verge of going down the path that Russia went in the revolution. Well, it's a terrible tragedy for America if it happens, but it's a terrible risk for the rest of the world. Because if America becomes the radical leftist country now, the way Russia became 100 years ago, with all its military power and all its economic power, this is going to be a huge problem for Europe, a huge problem for Russia, or it's entirely...
It's cut off at the end there, but he actually says the huge problem for China at the end there. I mean, really? America's going to be a big problem for China, and he cares about that? Why is that an issue? The whole thing is insane, obviously. Like, we're not heading into a Russian revolution, but you can certainly see what they would like people to believe, and you could certainly see what they're trying to make Republican Party talking points out of, and certainly trying to tell Republicans what they should be fearful of, when this is clearly not happening. There's nothing in the Biden administration that feels anything like a Russian revolution. I mean, it's the most conciliatory government you've ever come across, and certainly, reaching across the aisle where possible many, many times. And there's no sense for me that you're looking at a chipping away of rights or anything like that. So it's complete nonsense. But there he is espousing it.
If it were,
I want to say too that sorry.
Go ahead, Gal.
Sorry, Joe. Just real quick, I just want to say we're not insisting that the Republicans are watching Russian television. Okay, what they're doing is using active measures and different propaganda tactics to put this information in front of Republicans. So we're not accusing Republicans of knowingly spreading Russian propaganda. We're not accusing them of going to Russia state TV websites and learning this stuff. But there are methods that are being used. Like, for instance, when Ted Cruz retweeted, a military commercial straight from Russian propaganda TV. So I wanted to be clear that we're not accusing them of actually going and acquiring this and then disseminating it. It's being disseminated to them through tactics that they don't even recognize.
There's an ecosystem that distributes these talking points, and it certainly might start at Russian television, or it might start in the fringes of the internet. It might start on Parler or on Gab or whatever it is they exist today. But it launches itself through the system, and it lands up in the Republican Party, as we saw through the Epps accusations in the last few days, which we're going to get to in just a second. But sorry, Joe, I know you want to jump in there.
It's just interesting. I remember after 2016, a little bit after that, I think, I recall somebody, I don't remember exactly which arm of the Kremlin they were in, but they were removed from the meeting by having their head put in a bag, right? So somebody put a bag over their head, they released them from the meeting. If we were descending into what Bausman is espousing, then Jim Jordan would have had his head in a bag, right? I mean, all those things would be happening. None of those things are happening.
No, of course not. Of course not. And we're following the rule of law. And if ever there's an argument for Merrick Garland sort of appeasement, if you would call it that, then this would be it.
We're a year out. We're a year out, and we're still talking about whether or not we can subpoena members of Congress, right? I mean,
just to testify. Never mind for any criminal activity. So
we're nowhere near that.
Nowhere near that at all. But let's just look at what some people are talking about. Someone on the chat, David, is talking about Car Arms facility. So Car Arms is run by the brother of the Reverend Sean Moon, who's the son of the real Reverend Moon. None of them are real reverends, of course. He runs the ministry of the Iron Rod, which is this crazy, fanatical, right-wing ministry, which basically celebrates the AK-47 as its god. And they were present there at the Capitol. And their friends, Bausman is very close to the Reverend Sean Moon. They've appeared many times in protests together and have basically coordinated events, we believe, because on January the 3rd, we know that the Moonies and their entourage was staying with Bausman at Bausman's barn over there on their way to the January 6th events, where they were caught on tape and even shared video of them taking part in the coup attempt. Go ahead, Gal.
Yeah, sorry about that. I believe, I don't know the exact date, I think it was in maybe November, but Car Arms actually was one of the sponsors for one of these kind of Christian rallies that you're talking about, Joe, where Mike Flynn was and several of these other people out there, and the Reverend Moon guy, the son, I think you said it was. Yeah, he was there also. He was there. So I don't know if you guys saw that event, but this is the event on the
30th of December. The one on the 30th of December? Is that the one?
No, it was before that. It was a really big one, and Car Arms was the sponsor for it.
Oh, this is the Freedom Rally. They do this big Freedom Rally thing that they do. Yeah, it's true. Bannon was talking there. Dana Loesch, I think, is that her name? She was speaking there. Ridiculously high-profile people speak at a freedom event by the Ministry of what is it? The Ministry of the Iron Rod. What a ridiculous name that is.
Dana Loesch was the host of NRA TV, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Good point.
She has her own show now too, just so you guys know. I monitor that sometimes also, and it's pretty awful.
Oh, thank you for doing that. that's real service.
Taking one for the team.
But really, it's interesting. Why does a church need to have a arms manufacturer aligned to it? I don't know too many churches that do that, but here's one that does. It's kind of doesn't make any sense. And I think they make a Trump gun, if I'm not mistaken, a gun with the Trump logo on it. So someone is saying, Jessa BAHX says, so I wonder if Bausman had a hand in the disinfo campaign in Philly that I kept coming into contact with while canvassing in the city for 2020 election. Absolutely, he did. He was out there a lot, and there's video of him and the Reverend Moon outside. I don't remember the Secretary of State there, but outside his offices and his home protesting and, saying crazy things, honestly. But I've played that on a previous show, and people can find that in my past episodes about Bausman if people are looking for that. But absolutely was involved in that.
Bausman was recording him.
Yeah,
when he was speaking.
The Moon, yeah,
Bausman went live. Mm-hmm.
He had lots of live streaming. I think he was also live streaming the event of happened on January the 6th, but to probably a closed audience, likely in the Kremlin or something. David's responding here. If Bausman was working in PA, you could bet he visited the Car Arms. I would say that's probably likely true. And Upstate Farmer is saying that guns should be microchipped with IDs like dogs. Interesting. For traceability. And then Jesse here again saying, and the strange right-wing coverage of the lootings and riots in Philly, where they manufactured fake news about lighting churches on fire and stuff. I didn't realize that was fake. I didn't realize they'd faked some of that. That is interesting. All of that probably is coordinated. You would imagine it's all coordinated, and it's probably coordinated out of the Kremlin, and that's why it seems to work so seamlessly. All right, let's see what we can do. I did find that video of Alex Jones, which I think we just need to watch because it's hilarious. So I've cut it down because I couldn't handle the whole thing. So there's an edit in the middle of that. It's not entirely as you're seeing it here. But this is when Alex Jones found out that Vladimir Putin, for some reason, was a fan of his show and said hello to him. I don't know who this other guy on here is. I think it's his correspondent. But let's take a look at what he had to say.
The economy, because like you said, it's a mixed bag. Vladimir Putin says to say hello, by the way. Did that really happen? Oh, yeah. He said, when you see Alex, tell him I said hello. That's crazy. Yeah. I better not go over there, though. I'm going to interview Putin this year. Really? Yeah, going over there. Now I am interested in this because I was told by the head of RT America before they even launched it, like 8-9 years ago. Putin's a big listener, and by the way, he likes how you play. He loved my show. He imitated me at the 10-year anniversary dinner. Well, I know you're a big star all over the world, but Putin knows you. Yeah, he's imitated me. I did this thing where David Cameron ripped his shirt off at the governor's dinner, and he looked at this clip and he said, "Your journalists are very interesting. The one, Max, who ripped his shirt off is very interesting." Let's get back to the Putin thing. Oh, this will be newsworthy. Let me hear this. What did he say? Well, I'm just telling what he said. I noticed you like to go bare-chested now. I mean, I think Putin started that. I did that as a joke. That whole bare-chesting thing. I did it to troll the media. This is what drives liberals crazy, because Putin dares to be a heterosexual. So therefore, guys, can we Google Alex Jones on a horse? Evil in some way. Alex Jones on a horse? Putin's heterosexual. And so therefore... I'm not bragging, but aren't those some big pecs?
Just, I want to get the last line here.
Awesome pecs. Those are Putin-sized pecs. You've gotten Putin pecs.
I'm sorry.
Alex Putin peck. That's right. He on the horse, all naked. So this is what drives the liberals crazy. Especially in Britain, where not a single person in government would be classified as.
I'm trying to get you to say
I shouldn't have been laughing because I was laughing when I did it. No, I did it to troll him, and then the media was like in a whole bunch of newspapers. They go, "He's a role model. He's bringing peace around the world. He's a statesman." And so... See, I am a Russian agent. The economy...
That was what I was trying to get to, is when he says he's a Russian agent. Sorry, I had to put you through all that. But, it really, there's not enough time in the world to apologize for that. I really can't say sorry enough. But, the things about Alex Jones, it might be laughing about it there, but he really is a part of that ecosystem we talk about, which is, disseminating this Russian disinformation everywhere. It's not a surprise to me that he was also once awarded an award by the public arm of the SVR, which is basically the espionage services of Russia, an award for humanitarian rights and freedom, because he was banned by Google in America. They awarded him an award along with Maria Butina that year. So, this is a guy who's got close ties to Russia. He certainly seems to admire Putin. I mean, couldn't be admiring Putin any more than he was there.
He was pretty proud.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see the look on his face. He looked really proud of that statement that, Putin was at least, on, he was on Putin's radar. I mean, no, I wouldn't be proud of that.
Yeah. Why is he on Putin's radar?
Well, when he's talking about, when he's talking about the head of RT, when he talked to the head of RT before RT launched, he's talking about Alexander Dugin.
Oh, really? Wow. Are you sure it's Alexander Dugin? I didn't realize he started.
Yeah, there's documents. That's who he was talking to? Yeah, there's documents that went with that.
Oh, that's really interesting. Alexander Dugin, by the way, just to bring this all full circle for everyone, is this Rasputin, Putin's Rasputin, who's tied to Konstantin Malofeev. He's certainly the person who funds all of his work. And as you can see, that's part of the Charles Bausman influence circle that we see in Russia through the Russian Orthodox Church. That's really interesting information. I'm not going to play any more of Charles Bausman's documentary because, frankly, I can't stomach very much more of it. But I do want to just, bring us back full circle to say one thing about it, which is that those talking points, the false flag, let me just put up the slide here. But the false flag, the idea that Pence somehow backstabbed the former president, and the idea that he was the reason we landed up with all the violence, those talking points are actually becoming real in the Republican circles. Certainly they're the kind of talking points they've started to push. And particularly this idea that the FBI informants did this. And this we've been seeing lately with the story around Mr. Epps. I can't remember his first name, but you might have read this in Washington, Ray Epps. So Washington Post had a piece today after Ted Cruz again brought up what Epps has, what people have been alleging about Epps, which is basically that he was on the most wanted list, that this is an allegation that he was a FBI informant, and that on the night of January the 5th, he was caught on tape telling people to storm the Capitol the next day. You know the story better than I do, both of you actually, but why don't you pick it up here, Joe, and tell people more about who this guy, Mr. Epps, is.
Yeah, so Ray Epps is I think he was the Arizona president chapter of for the Oath Keepers, right? Mm-hmm. So this goes back a long ways. I think back in 2011, he was with Stuart Rhodes at some hometown buffet, and they were talking about things. So they go way back. The thing about Ray Epps is he is sort of this thing that they've found. I feel right. It's like I think if you look at the video. That I think it was Baked Alaska. I think there's a guy Baked Alaska.
That is Baked Alaska, yeah, for sure.
And he starts to chant about him being a Fed, right? So there you have this whole group surrounding Ray Epps. I think it was January 5th. And at that night, he's basically out there telling a crowd, we have to storm the Capitol. We have to go into the building, right? And he's saying we have to go in. And then the whole group's around him and they kind of say Fed, Fed, Fed. Now, I don't know how that came to be. I don't know, how that video was edited. I'm not sure.
This is on the live stream. It's on Baked Alaska's live stream. So I actually saw this live stream right the next day. So it's legitimately the live stream. It's an event that they're having the night before in I don't know where.
So I think they sort of take this as the kernel of truth, right? You have this little morsel that you can then build upon this narrative, right? You could then say, well, wait a second, this guy was calling for people. You could see it. Here he is on video, and he's pointing and say we have to go into that building. Now, to take that and blow it into he was the ringleader for all of this stuff, right? Is ridiculous. I mean, there's no proof to that. I think he even testified to the January 6th committee that he wasn't, that's not true.
This is what's happened, in the last few days. The committee has come out, and said, and it's very rare for them to say that this guy said to them under oath that he is not operating as an FBI informant. Now, I mean, the language here might be difficult and is complicated to parse because there are, in fact, many confidential informants working for the FBI all the time.
Sure.
Many people think Donald Trump is an FBI informant, and there's lots of evidence to suggest that he is an FBI informant. And maybe one of the reasons they can't prosecute him is because he's an FBI informant. There are a lot of people in the Trump world that are former criminals who have deals with prosecutors in order to get them off of their crimes. That might mean that they were FBI informants. It doesn't mean that they're not actually also acting in their own in their own interests by supporting whomever they want to support as Americans. And so it's a difficult thing for people to parse. Go ahead.
Well, actually, when insert another option, which is a lot of these guys, they're former military, they are former police officers. I think Ray Epps was former police. And I don't want to downplay that loyalty that they feel to the country. I think it is still really important to recognize that. And to me, Ray Epps he's about, I don't know, my dad's age maybe or something. And, I think personally that Ray Epps probably turned himself in as somebody who does have, follow an oath, believes in law and order, things like that, of that age group. And it's likely that he's just cooperating. There's an opportunity there that he wasn't an informant to begin with or anything. He just was there. He thought he was doing the right thing based on all the propaganda he was fed. And when he realized that he crossed a line and committed crimes, then he turned himself in.
There certainly were a lot of military.
A former police officer might do. Yeah.
There's a lot of military and police officers there. You're right. And that's important that we need to note that. But, the language around confidential informant and cooperating in witness or whatever they call it, they're very similar things. Some people might view the confidential informant as an informant as a cooperating witness, because they often are similar things. Am I misreading what you said?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, because if you're cooperating, it's because you were part of the conspiracy. So you are cooperating to lessen your, sentence against you, essentially, is what I mean.
Lots of people have prosecutors' agreements from crimes they've done before, which get them off the hook for various things.
Right.
I'm talking there; those people are also informants. They have it under a prosecutor's agreement that they're informants, and they're not allowed to do certain things, but they're also informants. And a lot of that's where it gets really fuzzy.
But I don't think Ray Epps falls into that.
We don't think he's an informant at all. We don't know if he is. I don't. The truth is, we don't know, and
exactly right.
And the FBI will never share that with anybody, because if they did, they wouldn't be confidential informants, and so the whole thing falls apart, and they can't prosecute crimes, and the whole system sort of
and that's why the mendacity of Ted Cruz is boundless, because he's smart enough to know that. He absolutely knows that. I think he was questioning somebody in a judiciary hearing, and he was saying, one of the FBI folks, I think it was Jill Sanborn, he was saying, were there any active participants? Were there any federal agents who were active participants?
Right.
Well, what's an active participant? Active in what? Participating in what? And then I think the other part of it is, he's saying, were they confidential informants? Well, Ted, you just said confidential. She can't tell you that. And if she's going to tell you anything, it's going to be, the FBI or the DOJ line of, I'm not going to jeopardize any ongoing investigations. So he knows that she can't answer it. And he asks the question knowing that he's going to get that response, so that he can then put it as a soundbite out on the news, so that people could then fill in with their own bias in their own mind what that really means, right? So they lead you to your own conclusions, which is why this is such a dangerous thing, to have this misinformation spread out to millions.
And then they blur the language. They take this language of, okay, here's an informant or a prosecutor and a witness is cooperating with the prosecution, and they meld that with FBI agents are out there doing things in the ground, which, I don't know if FBI agents were out there doing things on the ground. Maybe some informants were. Maybe they were just being informants. Maybe they were just there to see what was going on. But you got to remember that this language and this idea started last year on January the 7th with Charles Bausman on Russian TV. And it's only now becoming the center stage argument of the Republican Party a year or so later, because they've run out of other things to frankly argue that, we're now back at this idea that, the FBI was somehow involved in fomenting this. How would the FBI have done everything involved? Did the FBI suddenly possess the bodies of Boebert and all the other Congress people? Did they suddenly embody those people in order to arrange the events? Did they give the tours of Congress to all these rioters that came there? Were they Donald Trump that day? Were they possessing Donald Trump's body that day and not asking people to go away and to calm down and to bring peace back to the Capitol? They couldn't have done all of those things. Maybe they had an informant or two on the ground. Maybe one of them was taking their role more seriously than others. But to suggest that this is now indicative of an entire operation is nonsense, because it's not possible. It's just not possible.
think of who would have had to do it, right? It would have been the deep state that they're completely against anyways, right? So they completely harp on the deep state. Meanwhile, if it were to happen, it would have been the deep state to have done it.
Good point. Well, absolutely.
The
I mean, it's complete nonsense.
Double agent deep state.
Yeah. Right. Because that's the problem. You start watching these things and you land up twisting yourself into knots. I mean, I was watching this entire documentary today and I was like, what is he actually arguing? It makes no sense. There's no ways all these things could be true at the same time. Each of them could be true on their own, but certainly not at the same time.
Which, Zev,
go ahead, Gal.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think they understand the right-wing ecosystem so well, and this is what we see with some of the narrative that happens, is there's a statement made without evidence, and then all of a sudden the evidence is produced. And I think that's what we're looking at here, because originally we're looking at, it was Antifa. Then all of a sudden you have, you Jack Posobiec's, those little guys that run around and, spread bullshit, excuse me language, and they find it for them, they find it and they bring it up. And then all of a sudden the Congress people are like, I had evidence this whole time, but they don't. And so when you look at this FBI thing, I think that's where this comes from too, because Baked Alaska would have been one of those people in that right-wing ecosystem who would have been the searcher of the evidence prior to this. So he probably said, oh man, I had this guy on my live stream. You guys check this out. That's I bet you we were messing with him and we were saying, Fed, it'll be perfect, right? So it's like they find their evidence after they create the statement. That's right. I mean,
by the way, I think our Twitter feed has gone off, so I apologize if people are got to a cutoff after an hour. That might be something I did, but I don't think so. If those people are still out there, you're watching on YouTube. I hope you're still on YouTube, and I know you're on narrative.org/TV. Everyone else will have to watch this in reruns, I guess, the rest of this, because we've only got a few minutes left, and I don't know how to make Twitter start working again. But apparently YouTube is working. Thank you, Marie. Thanks for that update. That is really strange. I'll worry about that later. I do want to play this one last thing. Yesterday we tied this all back through Grant Stern's incredible reporting with Patrick Simpson to Ed Lazansky, and it was very revealing to me how involved Ed Lazansky has been in not only amplifying this philosophy that America's on its decline and somehow we have to return to the monarchy or autocracy, but also how responsible he is for actually putting together a lot of these activists, or these spy groups, or whatever you want to call them, including Charles Bausman. So we know that Charles Bausman and Lazansky were very close. They refer to each other as friends. Lazansky is also one of the writers on Charles Bausman's Russian Insider, and that's interesting. And they both, speak at various events together. They support each other on a regular basis. And just so we are reminded, Lazansky is a very long-term operative here in the United States with links that are very, very deeply tied to the Republican parties. Operatives like Paul Manafort, Donald Trump, of course, Roger Stone, Jack Kemp. And you can see the list down there. Dmitry Simes is another Russian spy that was sent home. Dana Rahabasha is there. This is the who's who of Russian interference all the way into 2020. Plus, you see him there as being the correspondent analyzing elections in Russia for RT. This is a very big deal in their world. So, it's interesting that Lazansky and Bausman were hosted at a conference together. This is years ago, and Bausman must have been a little bit green. And he starts doing his presentation at this conference, and the video or projector wasn't working. So he had to make it up or try to remember what he had to say all on his own. And he gets very lost very quickly. And who does he turn to help answer the questions that are being asked? He turns to Ed Lazansky, who's hosting the event. And it's a little bit of insight. I'm not reading too much into it, but it's worth taking a look at what's happening here.
But I could mention a lot of blogs. I was supposed to show all this on the video, but it's not working. So I'll just have to tell you about it. Another site that is very good is fortrose.com. We use a lot of material from there. There's a blog called The Moon of Alabama. Now, I have no idea who runs it. I get the feeling the guy's probably in Germany. But I would recommend that very much. We use that a lot. Help me, Ed. What are some of the other ones?
I think since we cannot show it,
yeah,
we have emails of people, so we will send them all. Actually, some of those sites were listed in the program. So
yeah, a lot of them are listed on the program.
So help me, Ed. Help me answer the question I should know the answer to because I'm the editor of this publication. Why does Ed Lazansky need to answer that question? Why wouldn't he know the answer to that? And why does Ed Lazansky know that all these things are actually in the program? All these same links are actually in the program, and they'll have it available via email for everybody. This is a telltale sign of an operation. When the guy who's presenting doesn't remember his lines and the video isn't playing, suddenly he brings in Ed Lazansky, the master in chief here of Russian interference, to help him answer these questions. I think it's very telling. It's an interesting clip, nevertheless.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I feel like Charles felt like he was going to be punished after that. Like that was very demoralizing, and Lazansky did not look happy.
No, and I've seen, I've watched the entire thing. I mean, Bausman tries to project a sort of a story that he created this publication and it suddenly became a runaway hit because of its, amazing content. But none of it rings true. And he started it in Moscow and then decided to move to Pennsylvania to continue running it in 2017 or something like that. Like it's an unusual. It's an unusual timeline. If he was starting it in Russia, why wouldn't he stay in Russia? And if he was, if he needed to come back to the States, why wouldn't he have started the publication after arriving here? Not in the United States, not incubated it in Moscow somewhere. Anyway,
and he's so well spoken, Zev. Like, I mean, that's the first time I've seen him kind of stutter or fumble over his words. I mean, I've been watching so much of this guy, and he's incredibly articulate. He doesn't use very often. He doesn't forget words, and so that was really interesting for me because I hadn't seen that.
It was early on. That's the thing. I found it so interesting. He hadn't yet studied all these lines as well as he needs to, and you're absolutely right. He very rarely misses a beat, and here he was missing a really important beat in a few of them at this conference. Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of been in front of crowds where I've forgotten some of the things that I wanted to tell them.
Me too.
It happens.
Yeah.
It does happen. But if you're giving something like that and you're doing it in front of your torsion, if you will, you should really know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, he put together the video. He claims to have put together the video that he was about to play, and it was a slideshow. He would have known the what it was in there. He wouldn't have needed that to help him. But who knows? I mean, we don't read too much into it. Certainly, I have no problem thinking and saying out loud that this man has all the appearances to me of a Russian agent. He certainly fits the profile. The activities he did certainly fit the profile. The fact that he was rushed back to his farm to do the documentary that was then aired on Rossiya, which is Russian state television. They wouldn't just do that for anybody. And by the way, in the Russian documentary, they talk about him being a descendant of George Ross and Betsy Ross and all these, it's crazy claims. I mean, maybe they're true, but I doubt it. So, they've positioned him as someone who's a real authority figure on American history and on American politics, when he's not.
A patriot.
Yeah, a real patriot. Yeah.
A patriot.
So I find it, I find him really interesting. I think people need to be spending a little more time focusing on who this guy is and all the other Russian operatives, because there are so many, as we've discussed on the show before, that have hung around in this world of Trump Russia and all the way into January the 6th. And not only Russian operatives, clearly there were Chinese operatives, there were all sorts of other nationalities there, but the Russians ones just stare at you. I mean, it's sort of like it's hard to avoid them, and they're pretty evident. And it does feel to me like the Russians are beginning to wrap up their operations in the United States, because a lot of people are dying. A lot of people have returned home, as we've noted. Maria Butina has gone back home. Symes has gone back home. Now Bausman has gone back home. It's interesting that Ivan Reichlen is still wandering around in the United States. But as this chart shows, especially at the bottom line there's a lot of Russian involvement, plus Russian involvement in InfoWars, as we've just shown you in Alex Jones's world, but also Russian involvement in the Washington Times and in the OAN television station, and also Russian Insider, which we've now spoken about. So that's all I got. Any last thoughts, Gal or Joe? Go ahead, Joe.
A couple of things. Two things. That last slide that you put up, not this one, the one that showed Dmitry Symes and all those names like Oleg Deripaska and that. Looking at that and seeing Paul Manafort's name on there.
Mm-hmm. This is Patrick Simpson and Grant Stearns' document. Yeah,
that's right. And remembering that it was Paul Manafort who recommended Mike Pence. And now Mike Pence going through this sort of, I don't know if I should cooperate with the committee, and I'm not sure if I don't know, maybe Karen needs to tell me to pray on it, and I'm going to have to ask Mother. But I mean, that's just one sort of point that I wanted to point out there. The other thing is, at the end of your show, you always like to say, do you have anything to plug? And I actually have something to plug.
Okay.
I'm plugging democracy tonight because tomorrow the Senate is starting to move forward, I believe, with debate on voting rights. And if you don't want to live in a country that we were just talking about for the past hour and a half, about all these different things about gaslighting and all these different things about revolution and all these autocracy and tyranny and everything else, democracy is awesome. I can't express it enough. Call your senators. They're starting tomorrow. Schumer's doing, I believe he just came out with some process that he's doing. It's a process that it's a 3 agreement process. I don't know exactly the name of it, but it has to do with the House. And it's whether or not the House and the Senate can agree on language within bills. And if they don't agree within 3 times, the Senate can't filibuster it.
Oh, interesting.
So they're going to be moving forward with the process. I believe it starts tomorrow. They're looking to have a vote by MLK, which I believe is Monday or it's coming up. But the point is, you've got to call your senators. Even if you live in a blue state and your senators are already going to vote for democracy and vote for voting rights, call your senators. And if you have friends in West Virginia, call their senators. Call Joe Manchin. You can do this. That's why democracy allows us to make phone calls across all states. So you can call senators, call Arizona, call West Virginia. Democracy is on the line, and I cannot stress that enough.
Thank you for saying that so forcefully and well, Joe. It's so important. And just to underline, just because your senator might be a Democrat doesn't mean they'll vote yes or that they're supportive of voting rights. And we want to make sure that every single senator is going to vote. And that means some pressure from voters. So no matter who your senator is, call them and tell them you want this voting rights bill passed. And these, especially Republicans, because there might be some soft Republicans who are scared of losing their seats. But there also might be some Democrats who are maybe a little wavering or hiding behind Manchin as an excuse not to vote. But absolutely, call your senators, call your representatives, insist that they support democracy. And it's not hard to see why democracy is better than what the alternative is. When you look at this kind of state propaganda that we've been airing tonight from Russia, you certainly know that you don't want to live in that country. Gal, any thoughts from you? Any last thoughts from you?
I mean, I can't really follow up on that except to give you the phone number, and that is 202-224-3121.
What number is that?
100%, Joe.
Who's
that is for the U.S. Senate.
U.S. Senate.
That will go directly to the switchboard, and you can call your U.S. Senate and get online with any of them. It's 202-224-3121.
3121. All right. Let's see if I can get it up here on the screen for everybody to see. Well, there it is. I think that's in a weird place. But that's the number, right? 202-224-3121. Call the Senate. Call the Senate. Call your senator and insist they support the voting rights bill. And it's the 17th, I believe, is the date. People are giving me, is it 3121 or is it 2131? I've got different things. And you say it's 3121, right?
That's what I have, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, it's 3121. So that's the number. Call away, and that's very well done, Joe. Thank you very much for doing it. That's at Joe Dempsey. You can find him there.
At Dempsey 2.
At Dempsey 2. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm going to get this right one of these days. And at Gal_Suburban, who one day will get on camera. I'm convinced of it. Great job on this and last night. Thank you so much for being here, Gal.
Thank you.
All right, and that's the show for tonight. We wish you a very good night. We'll be back for the after show on Friday. Thanks again for being here and for supporting Narrative. Have a good night, everybody.
Night.
Narrative is made possible by viewers like you. Join today and support truly independent journalism at patreon.com/ patreon.com/narrative. That's patreon.com/narrative.